the zero-touch deployment as easy as ABC session. My name is Chris Reynolds and I'm a supervisor for the channel sales engineering team here at Jamf. So first and foremost, when we say zero touch, what do we mean? Well, we mean zero touch by IT. For years, device administrators have relied on technical staff to prepare new computers for employees. The technicians either ordered new devices as needed or pulled them from a stockpile. Technicians would then usually follow a checklist to install maybe the operating system, and then they installed and configured all of the applications that they would need, quite often pre-creating user accounts and then creating shortcuts to frequently used items and network connections. This was a very hands-on approach, and it could take hours to get a single computer ready. The idea behind Zero Touch is to take the technician out of the loop when preparing a device and let the device prepare itself. But taking something as complex as preparing a device will take some planning on your part. It can be done though, and that's the purpose of today's presentation. We're just going to walk through how to make zero-touch deployments a reality. So Zero Touch starts with enrolling a device into Apple's School Manager. With Apple's free program here, we can direct devices to our Jamf server. You'll often see administrators abbreviate this as ASM. This is where you identify the devices you own to Apple. Apple's School Manager can also include additional support for defining and managing teacher, student, and class lists. From here, your device serial numbers populate into Jamf. Jamf has to know about them before we can enroll them. And once we enroll them, we can control the apps and settings they'll receive. A school, for example, may want to predefine a list of devices for students and another list of devices for teachers. Students would get the apps they need for classes, and teachers would get the apps they need to manage their classes. With the serial numbers populated into Jamf, this isn't the same as enrolling them. These serial numbers are used to scope a pre-stage enrollment, whose purpose it is to control how the setup assistant behaves on these devices. Pre-stage enrollment allows us to do things like setting the time zone for iOS devices or adding a hidden administrator account for Macs, but most commonly we use them to skip a lot of the setup screens, like creating an Apple ID or accepting terms and conditions that appear during enrollment. Skipping these screens makes provisioning the device take less time and dramatically reduces the amount of interaction for the end user. When you save the pre-stage enrollment, we sync with Apple and store that on their network. All of these steps happen on the administrative side of provisioning prior to enrolling the device. When everything is ready, our device can be enrolled into Jamf, and this starts with the Setup Assistant. Whether it's on macOS or iOS, the Setup Assistant has a few required steps at the beginning that generally can't be skipped. They begin by choosing a country, choosing a language, and connecting to a network. Once on a network with an internet connection, the device then reaches out to Apple with its serial number and retrieves the pre-stage enrollment. That pre-stage enrollment tells the device where to connect to its Jamf management server. As soon as the Mac or iPad has connected to Jamf, the server tells it to begin installing apps like self-service and App Store apps, as well as management settings like configuration profiles. Macs will begin running policies and scripts to install packages, possibly bind to Active Directory, and once all of this is complete, zero-touch provisioning is done and the device is ready for the end user. This workflow won't run again unless the device is reset using something like an erase and install workflow for Macs or choosing erase all content and settings for iOS. And it's these 5 steps that make zero-touch provisioning workflow. So it's important to note the order here. This is a very specific order and events must occur in this order. We must complete our work in Apple School Manager before I'll see my device appear in Jamf. And likewise, my device serial numbers must appear in Jamf before I can add them to a pre-stage enrollment. All devices must complete the Setup Assistant before Jamf can install any apps or settings. So when you're testing your workflow, make sure that one step works before proceeding to the next. Now that we know the order of the steps, let's examine each one in a bit more detail. So we'll start with Apple School Manager. This is a free service from Apple and is provided to you to enable automated device enrollment. If you aren't already enrolled, you can do so at school.apple.com. This process will take a few days, so be patient, and when you're done, you return here to log in and manage your devices and App Store apps. The Apple portal allows you to create accounts for anyone you want to designate responsibility for managing devices. Multiple people don't need to share an account and shouldn't. And a recent addition I'd like to point out here is that anybody with the Device Enrollment Manager role is also able to participate in the Apple Seed for IT program, where you can download and test betas of macOS and iOS before they're released to the general public. While you're here, it's a good time to consider automatically assigning your devices to your production Jamf server so you don't have to come back each time you purchase new devices. Once you've connected your Jamf Pro server to your Apple account, next thing to do is locate all your devices, assign them to Jamf Pro server, and once you've done that, you'll receive a confirmation that assignments are complete. To recap, once you have Apple School Manager, you'll connect it with Jamf for automated device enrollment. Once your server is connected, you can search for your devices by serial number and assign them to your server. So, what do these connections look like on the Jamf side? Jamf's connection to Apple School Manager has kind of two sides to it. The first is automated device enrollment. And this is where we can see a list of devices that have been received from Apple School Manager. While it's not very common, it's possible to have one Jamf server connected to multiple Apple accounts. And this could be useful for organizations or school districts that have merged and now need to manage all their devices in one management system. And the second one here is volume purchasing. And this is where apps that we've purchased through our Apple account appear. Again, if you don't immediately see your newly purchased apps, wait a couple of minutes and refresh the page. Just like automated device enrollment, it's possible to have multiple volume purchasing locations. So now we have devices and apps populating from our Apple portal into Jamf. Our next step is to configure pre-stage enrollments for our Macs and iOS devices. Because pre-stage enrollments for Mac and iOS devices are so similar, we'll just look at the ones for Macs. So the pre-stage enrollment has two purposes. First, it controls how the setup assistant behaves. The setup assistant is that series of screens that we see when we unwrap a Mac or an iPad for the first time. It generally begins with asking the end user to select a country, language, and connect to a network. The second thing that a pre-stage enrollment does is to point the device at the Jamf management server and enroll it. And this is where we get the term automated device enrollment. The end user holding the device doesn't need to know how to connect it to the management system or complete enrollment. It just happens automatically. You can also have restrictions here choosing whether the MDM profile can be removed, but my favorite is the setup assistant steps, where we can choose to skip while the device is being turned on for the first time, and we can decide which of these screens we want to see, even if it's none of them. So that completes everything on the management side of enrolling a device. Enrollment and the rest of provisioning occur on the device itself. This is where we get to see our pre-stage enrollment getting applied to the setup assistant. So let's take a look at that in action. So we get our device out of the box and we turn it on. And as the device is starting up and it connects to the network for the first time, we'll then be able to pull down those settings that we need. But here's the setup assistant for macOS. Depending on your end user's environment, some of the screens you see here may be slightly different. We start by selecting our country and then proceed through Apple's required screens for language and accessibility. When the device gets to the network, it gets the information which was saved. i.e. the device being managed by your organization's Jamf server and it is configured for a pre-stage. And that is when the real magic starts. Based on the settings that you have in the pre-stage, employees' devices will show or skip the Setup Assistant screens while it enrolls the device to Jamf and prepares it for the first time of use. Part of this process will take the user or the IT to a step where they get asked to create an account before they log in. But as an organization, do you want your users to create their own accounts themselves or let them decide a week credentials of their choice? We don't. We want something better than that for secured onboarding. Even IT admins creating a local account first and then provisioning the device will end up very hands-on. All of these steps can be avoided by using a better workflow for account provisioning, like pre-configuring a connection to Active Directory or an integration with an cloud-based identity provider. So let's talk about the integration that we can do with cloud-based identity providers like Azure, Google, Okta. To achieve that, simply add the installer package of one of our product offerings, Jamf Connect, to the pre-stage enrollment. We've added a Jamf Connect configured with Microsoft Azure for this example. Let's see what happens next. If you notice here, the pre-stage enrollment takes the user to the Microsoft Azure login screen instead of creating a local user account. This screen simply let the end user log in themselves without a single touch from IT. Everything is automated. Users authenticate themselves with their federated logins and the system creates an account on the device with the same credentials. Jamf Connect adds even more benefits like file vault enablement on login, customization and branding, but do feel free to come and have a chat to us if you'd like to know more. Once the Setup Assistant has completed, the final steps for provisioning our device start running immediately. For both macOS and iOS, those final steps include installing configuration profiles and App Store apps. For our Macs, we may also want to install packages and run scripts. For the best user experience, we want to keep the provisioning process as short as possible, and that means installing only essential software and only running the necessary scripts. A lot of other software can go into self-service for the end user to pick and choose. To take control of the order of your installations, we can also use a script and a policy, and this policy may be scoped to all computers and only triggers at enrolment. So this is our self-service application. As you can see, it's very easy to use. We can customize the icons, the button text, as well as the categories that any of our apps, scripts, policies, printers appear in. To notify users, we can also use an onboarding screen like Jamf Connect Notify or Octary. So lots of choices here with how you interact with the end user, the information that we give them, the identity that they use to log on to that device, the applications that are installed, and everything has been automated from the moment the device connected to the network. So that is zero touch from end to end, from Apple to Jamf to a pre-stage to a Setup Assistant and then final provisioning. Unfortunately, there are so many permutations and variations to this workflow that covering all of them would be impossible. But if you start at the beginning and follow each step outlined here, testing your workflow as you go and polishing it before you continue with the next step, you'll find it come together at the end. So we have two device management solutions to talk to you about today. The first one is Jamf Pro, which is our flagship MDM product that has been around for 20 years now. We've got full MDM support in here. We've got support for workflows like Jamf Setup and Jamf Reset for multi-use iPad. We can apply user-level configurations, and our list of integrations with third-party solutions is ever expanding. And our education-specific device management solution Jamf School, focused towards education. We've got some fantastic features in here like the Jamf Teacher app. It's very easy to set up. Device configuration is super simple, still has full MDM support, but with that education focus, we can really nail down the configuration to be specific to education to support teachers and students alike. Well, thank you very much for listening to the presentation today. And if you would like to know any more information at all, then please do get in touch with us.